Early in my incarceration, I had a pretty interesting experience. I had requested medical treatment. I was hoping to see a doctor, but we were on lockdown. What a lockdown is that the institution has elected to maximize security by minimizing inmates' freedom of movement. All the doors stay locked, all of the inmates stay inside of their cells unless they have some place that they have to be. Like myself, I'd requested medical treatment. In order to move inmates from one part of the institution to another during a lockdown, the officers will come to your door and they'll tell you to cuff up. What this means is that you take your hands and you place them wrists together and palms facing outwards, behind your back, and you walk backwards towards the tray slot, which is a small rectangular hole in your door. The officer will place handcuffs on you and then open your door and pull you out of the cell. By doing this, he's made sure that there's no point at which you're unsecured. You were already handcuffed before you exited your cell. Of course, there are multiple doors that you have to enter or exit to go to any part of the institution. Since all of the doors were locked, this officer had to call out occasionally, "Hey, open this door," or "Close this door," as he was moving through the institution. As we were exiting the building I was housed in, he called out to the officer in the tower, said, "Hey, let us out, open the door." As we were exiting, the officer in the tower, who I recognized as Phillips, looked down and gave me a nod because I was acquainted with him. The officer who was escorting me looked up at Phillips and said, "Don't look at us, you rat piece of garbage. I know what you did," and walked me out of the building and towards medical. I was shocked to hear an officer speak in this manner to another officer. They're supposed to be pretty respectful of each other, professional. I was trying to figure out whether I should ask him what Phillips had done that had made him so angry, but he just started talking. Apparently, Phillips was a rat. All the other officers hated him because whenever Phillips had found out that there was an officer who was involved in a drug ring, who was bringing drugs into the institution, he hadn't just busted the inmates who were receiving the drugs. He'd busted the officer as well. He'd told the administration, and this is the officer bringing the stuff in. Apparently, that violated a code, the green wall. And so, Phillips was on the out with everybody. It got me thinking, can an officer of the law be a rat? A more clear case of this happened in the Corcoran shoe fighting scandal. The feds were looking into the fact that inmates were getting shot, killed, stabbed. Nasty things were happening back in the Corcoran shoe at a very high rate. There was a correctional officer who had the handle Bonecrusher, and that is a hard handle. He was working back in the Corcoran shoe as part of the unit that was terrorizing the inmates back there. Though arrests were made and prosecutions were followed through on, there were no convictions in this case, so it's allegations rather than things that were proven in court. That said, it's pretty widely accepted that there was a small number of officers back in the Corcoran shoe who were engaging in gladiator-style combat with the inmates. They would take multiple inmates from rival gangs or who had noted histories of having problems with each other, and they'd toss them out on the mini yard together, or in a cell, and they'd bet on the outcome. If inmates didn't cooperate, or if there was a problem where somebody pissed off a guard, well, they shot them. 8 inmates were fatally shot, and dozens were critically wounded or paralyzed over the course of this reign of terror. Bonecrusher cooperated with the feds whenever they started investigating. As a result, he testified in open court against the small group of serial killers who were terrorizing inmates in the Corcoran shoe. That makes him a rat, doesn't it? By definition, he testified in court. He pointed. The most extreme example of an officer just going off the reservation that I can think of happened in Florida. There was a small group of officers who were doing the things that correctional officers do whenever they happen to also be evil men. They were selling drugs and beating inmates and essentially running their own prison gang back there behind the wall. The feds got wind of it and came to arrest them. 5 arrests were made and prosecutions were followed through on, but the 6th officer who was involved didn't want to go down easily. He pulled out a personal firearm and engaged in a gunfight with the cops. He was shot dead. What is particularly noteworthy about this is that it happened on prison grounds. The feds had elected to arrest these officers while they were at the prison. If you reach the point that you are wearing the uniform of a correctional officer, engaged in an active shootout with the federal authorities to try and cover up your wrongdoing to get away with the crimes you've been committing, I don't see how anybody can reasonably argue he was a cop anymore by any definition of the term. Similarly, the guys back in the Corcoran shoe, they may be wearing the badge, they may be wearing green, but no, they're criminals, not cops. And you can't rat on a criminal if you're a cop. Phillips wasn't doing anything but his job whenever he ratted on people who he'd caught committing crimes. And that's my answer to, can a cop also be a rat? Of course, it's very unlikely that in our lives we're going to have any opportunity to go and testify against a gang of serial killers operating behind the wall. That said, we do see in our everyday lives people abusing the little authority they have. It might be a manager talking down to one of his workers and we don't want to get involved. Maybe a parent who's unkind with their child and again, we don't want to get involved. But remember that whenever we see people do wrong, evil, and we don't speak up or stand against them, we become complicit in their actions. We become their co-conspirators. It's a choice we all have to make. I hope you'll make the right one. Thank you for listening today.